Good morning, Jack. Great to be with you.
I want to talk about a number of things, as many as we can cover in the few minutes that we have. Do you think the president's tweet on North Korea moved us closer to a war with them?
Look, I think what moves us closer to a war is the fact that Kim Jong-un has nuclear weapons, developing ICBM technology, and has declared his intention to attack the United States of America. That is a profoundly dangerous situation. And what I heard just a minute ago, you're talking about the talking heads on MSNBC. What I'd be willing to bet not a single one of them is acknowledging is that the reason Kim Jong-un has nuclear weapons, that we have this danger in the first place, is because of the grave mistakes of the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton led the world in lifting sanctions on North Korea in exchange for a promise from Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un's father, not to develop nuclear weapons. That was foolish. That was naive. And Kim Jong-un very predictably said, sure, we'll take the billions of dollars and use that money to develop nuclear weapons. Now suddenly everyone on the left has discovered, oh, goodness gracious, it is dangerous for North Korea to have nuclear weapons. Well, you could tell that at the time. And by the way, every one of these arguments applies exactly for Iran. And Obama did the exact same thing with Iran, putting us on the same path for the Ayatollah Khamenei to have nuclear weapons. The real answer to take from this is there are dangerous nations and dangerous people in the world, and the best way to keep America safe is prevent them from getting the weapons that could be used to murder millions of Americans.
We were talking with Congressman Will Hurd earlier this morning, and he said people ought to be talking more about the way Trump is tweeting and reacting to the protests in Iran, which is going to have much more long-term consequences than this one tweet about North Korea.
Look, I think that is very important. What's happening in Iran, we have a moment here that could be extraordinarily consequential. You've got thousands upon thousands of people taking to the streets in Iran, risking their lives to stand up against the dictatorial Islamic Republic. They want freedom. They want to be with the West. They want to be free from oppression. You know, in Iran, being homosexual is punishable by death. They throw you off a building or throw rocks on you. In Iran, you know, some of the images that are among the most powerful is their women standing up, pulling off their hijab, pulling off their veil, their face mask, and standing in the public square holding it up. Look, those women, those young women, you want to talk about bravery. Bravery is not walking around with a pink hat yelling at people. Bravery is standing in the public square saying, I, a woman, will not be oppressed, will show my face in public. And those women who are doing it are quite literally risking torture and death. Those images, if the government, if the Ayatollah captures them, they will use those images to convict them and in all likelihood sentence them to, at a minimum, torture and more likely death. This is an extraordinary moment, and there would be no change on the international scene that would be better for U.S. national security interests than for the Ayatollah, the mullahs to fall, and for Iran, the Iranian people to be freed from their despotism and return to the situation that was the case for many, many years, which is return to the situation of Iran being a friend of the United States rather than led by homicidal religious zealots and maniacs.
We're talking with Senator Ted Cruz right now on 550 KTSA. You're going back to a Senate now that just swore in Doug Jones from Alabama and Tina Smith from Minnesota. The Republican majority now is 51, and as we've seen, even that is really a majority on paper because very often one or more Republicans defects. What is 2018 going to look like for your agenda and for the Republican agenda in the Senate?
Well, there's no doubt we have an excruciatingly narrow majority. We had an excruciatingly narrow majority last year with 52, and you saw how painful it was, how difficult it was to keep 50 out of 52 Republicans on the same page. Obviously, with one fewer, down to 51, it's going to be even more difficult. That being said, I don't think that can be an excuse. We need to continue delivering. I am proud that Republicans came together at the end of last year on a major tax cut, a tax cut that is going to benefit small businesses and farmers and ranchers a tax cut that's going to benefit young people, that's going to benefit parents, that's going to benefit working men and women, a tax cut designed to bring more jobs back to America, to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, to raise wages. That's what we were elected to do our jobs. We managed to do it even with our fractious, divided conference. And I'll tell you, Jack, what I'm spending every waking moment doing, both in 2018, just like in 2017, is trying to bring our Republicans together, trying to get us on one page, to deliver on the promises we made. We've still got a lot of work to do, and even with a narrow majority, we got to get the job done.
You're going to be challenged in your campaign this year on the charge that you spent your first term running for president and that you weren't working for Texas. What is your response to that going to be?
Well, I promised people of Texas in 2012 that if you elected me, that I would fight with every breath in my body to defend freedom and to defend the Constitution. And I think if you look at the battles in the Senate, one after the other, whether when Obama was president or this past year when President Trump was president, I think you will find that I have been front and center leading those fights each and every time, whether it was leading the fight against Obamacare, which I've done from day one, whether it was leading the fight to secure the border and stop amnesty and build a wall, which I've done from day one, whether it's leading the fight on Kate's Law. I introduced Kate's Law. Kate's Law, named after beautiful Kate Steinle, 32-year-old woman who was murdered in San Francisco by a repeat illegal alien with multiple criminal convictions who kept coming in illegally over and over and over again, kept getting released over and over and over again, finally killed that beautiful young woman. Kate's Law provides that if an illegal alien with an aggravated felony comes in a second time, there's a mandatory minimum prison sentence so that individual would have been in prison. Kate Steinle still would have been alive. Issue after issue after issue, or under President Trump last year, leading the fight to confirm Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, leading the fight to confirm strong constitutionalists to the federal courts, including two just a few weeks ago to the Fifth Circuit covering Texas, leading the fight to pass this tax reform, including within it the first major and the most significant federal school choice legislation in history. It was my amendment that was introduced. It passed 50-50 with the vice president breaking the tie that takes college 529 savings plans and now allows, not only can you save for college for them, you can now save for K through 12 education. You can use them to pay for public school, for private school, for parochial school, for religious school. Every parent can spend up to $10,000 per child per year from a tax advantage 529. That is a record, I believe, of delivering on the promises I made to the people of Texas, of standing and fighting each and every day for the principles I promised I'd fight for.
Now, here's the hard question, Senator. Okay, last question. This is the hard one. We were talking right before you came on the air. People were calling in with their favorite historical movie of all time. What is your favorite historical movie of all time?
I don't know about the historical piece, but I'll say my favorite movie of all time is unquestionably The Princess Bride. I adore that movie. I've seen it hundreds of times. And nothing is more fun than sitting with my daughters and watching it, reliving it with them. I think The Princess Bride, every line in that movie is brilliantly conceived.
That is one you can watch over and over again. All right, but we certainly would not consider that a historical movie. But
so if you want a historical movie,
give me a historical movie. We'll throw one out at me.
Amazing Grace.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. It's the story of William Wilberforce, who was a British member of Parliament.
In Parliament, right.
And he led the crusade against the slave trade in Great Britain. And at the time, the slave trade, England was the largest slave trader on the face of the earth, and it was the biggest industry in Great Britain. And he stood up in Parliament and said, slavery is wrong, this is immoral, this is evil, we should end it. And as the movie starts, he's a young member of Parliament, and he's advocating that, and he's laughed at, he's ridiculed. To give you an example, that would be like in Texas, someone standing up saying, we should ban oil and gas.
Right.
I mean, you would be laughed out of the room because our industry is based very, very heavily on oil and gas.
Yeah.
By the way, we shouldn't ban oil and gas,
No.
but England should have and did finally ban the slave trade, and it took 50 years of his fighting over and over and over again. And as an old man near the end of his life, he was there when Parliament passed the legislation outlawing slavery and outlawing the slave trade forever. And it's an amazing journey illustrating the power of what's standing for principle and speaking the truth despite incredible opposition, despite all odds. Amazing Grace is just a
That is a great one. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We hadn't had that one mentioned yet. Senator Cruz, always appreciate your time, sir. Happy New Year to you, and we'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Happy New Year. God bless.